So, being Christian means easier life, right? Not necessarily. So let's talk. So, being Christian means easier life, right? Not necessarily. So let's talk about it. Life can sometimes be a roller coaster, and we get it.
So tune into The Walk, where we'll explore the modern-day Christian journey by addressing challenging questions and trending topics faced by young adults today. No topic is off limits.
Welcome to The Walk. It's another Friday. We are so happy that it's Friday. I mean, maybe I'm the only one, but
Not alone.
So happy.
Not alone.
It is Friday. It's June. We're halfway through the year at this point. Crazy.
It's
actually insane.
Yeah.
It is really crazy.
And they said it was going to happen,
Yeah.
but I thought this year might be a little different because January felt so extended. And then,
it's
yeah.
the best month.
I don't know about that.
Oh, okay. All right.
But you're biased. His birthday's in January. We can't trust
It could
this.
have been an extended January, but yeah, it's halfway through the year, but we're making it. You know, we're blessed. Even though it's been a stretch of a week, we are blessed to be here, and we're glad that you're here as well. So, as always, you know what to do. Don't keep it to yourself. Make sure you share this with those who you love, and maybe if you don't love someone, they can use a hint. Drop them the show. Tell them, if you know someone with some pride issues, this is the show, and this is a way to give them a little hint, So definitely share this. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. Make sure you spread this love of the show. Like and subscribe. It is at MT Zion SDA, of course, on the YouTube and Facebook, but then also The Walk Live. And we've been actually posting excerpts on TikTok and Instagram. One of them actually did very well from
Which was
our
that?
live in-person show, which Gavin, you were on. We actually posted a clip from Brenda Hunt talking about, she was like, I don't really need, she can't say she doesn't need a man because she has a husband. But it was like, I think she went through a stage where that wasn't her focus. And she's like, she took herself out and stuff like that. On TikTok, that's our first video that's definitely broken 1,000. I think it's 2,000.
Okay, nice.
So
Climbing.
people resonated with that. So definitely check us out, support us on those places and spaces. But as we always do a testimony segment. Won't he do it? And I believe everybody here has a testimony. No pressure at all. So who got the testimony first?
I do. Well, I am very grateful for my parents because they have helped me a lot through my transition in careers.
Nice.
As most people know, I've been in K-12 education for over 15 years.
God bless his soul.
And, hey, man,
He felt that.
And I've actually been trying to get out of education since K-12 education since 2020. But of course, with COVID, I had to hang around a little bit longer. So with COVID, that actually led me to full burnout. And my parents, they gave me the space and the grace and the support to work through that burnout, but also to be able to actually transition from that career into a new one. And in the process, without me expecting it, I ended up getting my master's degree.
Wow,
congrats. So I'm really grateful for them and to be able to come through that transition.
Nice.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that is good. That is good.
Who's gonna be next?
I'll give testimony for Traveling Mercies. There was a particular day, I want to say this week, where I was driving and it was just like accident here, accident here, accident. I was like, holy, what's going on today? My drive is not that long that I should see this many. And one was literally, in my head, I'm like, maybe this was the same accident someone tried to get away, because it was literally within eye shot of one another. And there's 3 cops here and a smashed in car. Then right over there, there's more cops. And I'm like, yo, like this is crazy. So yeah, definitely thankful for traveling mercies. Also, I even noticed like on that drive, I'm like, sometimes it can be a little bit what's the word? Not as cautious as I should be, especially like
Reckless?
No. Okay, so when you first start driving, right, and you're super nervous and stuff, so like you're like double checking, triple check, double checking, like can I change lanes yet? Yeah. And then you get the hang of it, and you're like, change lanes, So I'm like, how many times on this same trip here have I just been like, yep, all right, yeah, and I'm weaving and whatnot. And I'm like, anything really could have happened at that 1 second where you should have checked, one more time, but you didn't. And I'm like, how many accidents could I have gone on this single drive? So just thankful that, God is merciful, because that would be so devastating.
Tragic.
Yeah.
Truth. So I'm going to give just in line of what Gavin just touched on too, just having a family and family that truly loves you and supports you through anything really, it's very underrated, and yeah, I'm appreciative of mine.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Thankful for career and where it's at. I am trying to balance two in a sense. One at the hospital, which is like the full time, and then my travel side, which was really a hobby in a sense, like a side hustle, became real serious. So like just balancing that has been interesting, but I think that I know time hasn't necessarily stretched for me. Like I have the same amount of time as everybody else, but somehow I'm able to fit everything in and still have the balance of being able to enjoy life, do what I want to do, travel, all that type of stuff. So however it's working out, whether it's a motivation or even the blessing of being able to be efficient, like I'm thankful for that, because I'm able to do both and I enjoy both, so it's cool. But yeah, thank you for sharing those. If you have your own, we want you to write it in the chat. As always, give God some props for what he's done in your life this week or this month, however it's been. But this next segment, I'm so excited for. Like when Andre and I were talking about the show and I was telling him about word on the street for this week, I was like, oh, we have one this week. And so you probably, I think this was the beginning of June, probably. And so you might have seen this story where a man appeared, I guess, for a hearing via Zoom. And so for this hearing, it was in Michigan, and the judge was surprised to notice that on the Zoom, call, that a man with a suspended driver's license joined the courtroom Zoom call while driving his car. And so seeing this, you didn't see this?
No.
Oh, you're in for a treat. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it's so funny seeing this video, because seeing it unfold, like you feel like you're there, because just like Zoom, you have the several screens, and so you have the window with the judge, and then you have the window with the man that's driving. And so the judge is kind of like confused, because he's just like, are you driving right now? And then the judge talks to, I don't remember who he talks to in the courtroom. He's like, maybe I'm confused here. Are we here for a suspended driver's license situation? And they're like, yes, Your Honor. So you see his reaction. It's just like, I must be getting punked right now. Like, this can't be real. And so the guy that's driving is like, give me a few minutes or seconds. I'm pulling into my doctor's office right now, right? I don't know if that's supposed to make it better, but so basically what happens is that after the judge clears up what's happening, there's no need for a hearing at that point. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, you know,
We're
what?
done here.
No bail or bond, whatever.
Turn yourself in today.
Today at 6 o'clock, I think it said, right?
Yeah.
6 o'clock, turn yourself in. And so it's just like, wow. And I remember it was being shared. Like, I got it so many times on Instagram. But then the twist happened again. And so I started seeing posts like people feeling sorry for him and like, you know, the judge considering like apologizing for something. Because I think it was like a confusion of he thought his license was unsuspended at some point because of something that happened. I heard mix of child support things and all that type of stuff. So I was just like, oh, okay, it's about to have a twist. You know, maybe it's not as bad as we think it is. But then another twist happens. And so you see the judge, like an interview again. And it's just like, someone else can help me if I.
Oh, I didn't see this
wrong.
part.
I didn't.
But from what I saw, the judge is like, not only, I guess he never had a license.
Oh.
Like he had a state ID or something like that.
Good Lord.
Interesting.
So I'm just like, okay, something's weird because it's something where either he never had a license, which I'm just like, well, how is it like a suspended license case? I'm not sure. Or whatever he had a suspended license for, he never did what he was supposed to do to get it unsuspended. So it's like one of the two things, but it's just like, wow, bro, I thought you were about to have an out. Like, you know, it was a misunderstanding. And now
It just got worse.
the whole is actually deeper. Either you never had it in another state or you never did what you were supposed to do to unsuspend it. So, and his lawyer was a waste of time. Like, you were trying to see her defend him. And
But how could she? She would have to be the greatest lawyer this earth has ever seen to say anything about that.
I don't know. She tried. I guess she's getting
Goodness.
paid no matter what. But I do wonder that, a slight side note about lawyers, like, aren't there just some cases that are not worth taking?
For sure.
But there's a lawyer for everybody.
Yeah, there is. I mean, if you have a free lawyer, they're there to defend those who can't pay for it. So,
They may not be the best lawyers.
But it's just like there's certain things that you're 100% guilty. So I guess the fight is either to get you a lesser sentencing,
yeah, sometimes that's it.
but sometimes it's just like they're really like trying to pretend like this person has like an out, and I'm like, I don't think that could be my career
Right.
because
Yeah,
I couldn't. I would not be able to take that seriously at
That's the
all.
thing, though.
Take it
That's-
seriously.
If they're the defense, that's their job. So even if they know you're guilty, even if all of the evidence are stacked against you, their job is still to try.
Defend you.
Yeah.
Right.
It's impressive, those that can do that.
Wouldn't you at least want somebody to have your back? At least one
Hopefully,
person?
I won't need that. let's get to the root. But I'm gonna give you a challenge in the comments. With what we said, is it okay to be a lawyer and a Christian? You know, maybe, but let us know. Anyway, we have a great topic today. I told you a preview about it in the beginning. We're talking about pride. And this topic, we're just going to call it the consequences of pride. And so consequences don't have to be bad. Consequences are just a result. So it could be positive, negative, but consequences of pride. And so with this topic, we're talking about, pride of life, stuff like that. And so kicking it off, I think it's just appropriate to define it, and you got the definition. So how do we define it?
Pride is defined as a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own achievements, the achievements of those with whom one is closely associated, or from qualities or possessions that are widely admired. That's from the Oxford Dictionary. So I would say the key takeaways here are pleasure or satisfaction from one's own achievements, or the achievements that people see about you, basically.
So do you all feel like that's the definition that people have about pride? Like when they think about pride and say...
No, because that's not the definition I thought.
What's the definition you
What do
thought?
think?
Like an aggressive self-esteem.
Okay. So pride would have to be over the top. Pride is not in balance.
Pride is not imbalance. Okay, so I feel like everybody has to have a certain amount of pride to be able to have a healthy amount of self-esteem. But taking it a little too far now, that's when you probably need to check yourself.
Okay.
How did you define it at first again?
Aggressive self-esteem.
Aggressive self-esteem. That's interesting. Do you have anything different?
Well, I wouldn't say different. I don't know if I would the same definition, but I wouldn't put the excessive in it. But I definitely agree with that second part of it,
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's hard to define because I think maybe it shouldn't have a gray area, but I feel like pride's hard to have black and white.
Yeah.
But I'm like, why is it hard to have black and white? I don't know.
It has like a bad connotation associated with it. Like anytime you've heard about pride, it's almost always in a negative light. So it really has that like, oh, pride is a bad thing. But I think in and of itself, like the definition, it's okay. But we hear about people that have too much pride. And so like too much pride got equated to pride itself.
Right.
And then that's where the problem came in.
So I think that the fact that we most often hear about it in a negative way kind of has to do with us being in the church.
That too.
And I say that because, again, when I came into the church, I was 16. So before that, pride was always a positive thing.
Really?
It was always a good thing.
Have
You're
pride in
supposed
your
to have
work.
Pride.
Right, okay.
You're supposed to
okay.
have school pride. You're supposed to have pride in your family. You're supposed to have pride in your accomplishments. Pride was always a good thing, but then when I became a Seventh-day Adventist, that's when I started to hear, pride is bad. You're not supposed to have it. It's about God. Give God the glory. You don't need to have the glory for yourself because you couldn't have achieved it if it wasn't for God. So give God the glory instead. And then pride became, or I started to hear pride as a negative thing ever since then. But and I never really agreed with that statement that pride is generally negative or bad. I think it's when it becomes excessive, then it's a bad thing. But in a normal sense, for me, pride is a good thing.
Same like you as well. Like I've always heard take pride in yourself or take pride in, how you present yourself to other people. So I can agree with what Gavin said.
That makes sense. I think for me, outside of church, the first thing that comes to mind when, like we said, pride was probably English class, like English lit, where you're reading different books or like mythology and they're telling you about, oh, like this person had too much pride and then this was their downfall. I can't remember any of these like names of the people, right? But for some reason, the word like hubris, I never forgot it. I don't know why, but like it was like whatever's name's hubris, and I was like, oh, what's hubris? And they're like, oh, pride. And I was like, oh, like, and it was that person's pride that like he had the consequence, like the guy that flew too close to the sun, the guy that had to constantly roll a boulder up a hill, like stuff like that. I'm like, oh, like they took their pride too far and like now there's this consequence for it. Outside of church, that's where my mind goes when it goes to pride. But it's true though, like when you said those other things, I'm like, oh no, I definitely know about, pride and like, especially in one's work. Like I take pride in the work that I do as a dentist for sure. And like pride in like your family or like school pride, those are definitely areas where pride is a good thing and a needed thing, actually.
You brought up a good point at the beginning of the show. That's crazy. It's just like, I guess that is true. Like I don't think I've heard of pride being negative outside of Christianity. So that's interesting. And I've been really trying to think. I'm like, that can't be true.
But I've also, in light of what Andre said, I'm whoa.
You get it all the time. Don't worry.
I have heard like pride goeth before a fall.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So like in light of what you said, reading mythology and stuff, that really does kind of give that example.
Yeah.
But even then, the key thing that you did say was it's when it becomes excessive.
Right.
Like you can fly, great, but why are you going so close to the sun?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
You're being excessive.
I guess it's partly because we have a hard time being just satisfied at certain places. Like We want the most sometimes. So we kind of looked up how to know if you have pride. So I think this is something that usually if we're scripting this show, we'd be like, oh, this is probably something we put later on as we develop, you know, the concept of what pride could be. But it's just like, I think for this show, we don't want anybody going on the radar that need to do a self-evaluation. So at the top of the show, let's do a pride test. And you know what? You may or may not agree with what's on this test. So how to recognize pride in others or yourself. So
Wait. I'm curious.
Okay.
Let's see if they come up with the things that are on this list.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah.
What would be on this test?
Yeah. What would be some determiners or things that you would see in people that you would determine like, oh, they have like too much pride?
Too much pride. Okay. Someone who's constantly talking about themselves, like, or their accomplishments when it's unneeded or unnecessary.
Okay.
Or it doesn't come up in conversation.
That sounds like you have an example.
I'm gonna work this in there.
That's a good one.
That's one for me.
Do you have anything?
High-minded comes to my mind. I just like think of my grandmother saying, they're high-minded.
What's that mean?
High-minded.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Having excessive pride.
Okay.
Okay. So on this test, it says a consistent need for attention and affirmation. And I guess the key word is consistent and need.
Yeah.
Because I think the need part is just like, is it like, how do you define a need? Like, I think there's sometimes we put things as like, I need this, but do you truly like need it, or do you want it? Do you desire it? Does it make you happy? You know, I don't know. Maybe that's subject, but consistent, excessive, maybe that goes along with why that would be on the pride test. An inability to receive constructive criticism. I 100% agree with this. Like, I don't think it's, you know, if I were to be asked the question and I didn't have this list, I don't know if I would have thought of it.
I wouldn't have.
But reading it, I'm like, that makes sense because I can instantly think of people I've encountered this with. Like the minute that, and I'm not talking about gray area stuff, like black and white stuff of like, this is wrong. And like not being able to accept it, see it, even have a conversation around like, you know, why do you think this? It's just like a straight up wall of like, there is no way. It's just like, that might be a person that has like a pride issue.
Like, I can't be wrong.
I can't be wrong.
Yeah.
But then no one's ever gonna really say it that way. And I think that's why it makes pride hard to detect, because it's something that you can kind of defend from a different angle.
That is true. I could see it your way, but don't you feel that people who maybe give you that notion of being too prideful kind of say, hey, I have some insecurities?
That they say it?
No, not verbally, but I feel like it kind of screams that indirectly.
Oh, okay.
Not to everybody, I would say.
that.
Not to everybody. You got to have, to someone with, what's that term? Like emotional intelligence, they will generally pick up on that. But I've realized that's not that common, that people have that type of like emotional intelligence to be able to see things in themselves and also recognize things in others.
That is
They'll
true.
like they will be like, I don't know what's wrong with, like, there's something wrong with him. They can't, like, that's all they can really say. They can't like, you know, dive a little bit deeper and see what that wrong is. You know?
Underestimating others' contributions.
Okay.
Thinking that maybe your contribution is the best, or like, you know, where would you be without what I've done, type of mentality. Rarely saying thank you.
I didn't think about that one either. That one was
That's an
surprising.
interesting one.
Because
Why do you think so?
everything's deserved, I guess. That's what like when I read that part, I was like, And I had to think, and I was like, okay, so maybe it's just that they think, you know, this was owed to me. Why do I really have to say thank you, you know?
Yeah.
I don't appreciate your work.
You think this is worthy of a thank you? It's just like thinking that your successor will have a hard time following you. Ooh, that's a good one. You have some that you added.
Yeah, so trouble asking for help. arrogance in general, self-centeredness, that goes back to what you were saying, like everything points back to them, boasting, unwillingness to apologize because they can't be in the wrong, judgmental attitude, reluctance to serve, and the last one, envy. And I put a question mark by that one because I was like, also did not see this one coming for the list of like
I feel like this
pride
one makes
testers.
sense.
Really?
Yeah.
What? I feel like it's a
Envious.
whole separate thing.
I think it's a bridge that's easy to cross
All right,
over.
so walk me through the bridge.
Oh man, this is hard. You're not supposed to ask me questions. So envy. So if I'm envious of someone, and I think a lot of these things have to be like you actually have to get to the root of the issue to actually make sense of it. But if I have pride, or if I'm trying to like maybe boost myself up or make myself bigger than I am, it could be because I'm comparing myself to a person or a situation.
Okay.
And so like with that, I could become envious of a situation or a person. As a result, I become prideful.
Okay.
So I would say envy, not in all situations of pride, but envy will come before pride.
Envy
But
is
that's
a
just my
stepping stool to
opinion.
pride. Okay, I can see that.
So, question.
Yeah.
If this is a test, how many of those would a person have to check off to be considered prideful?
One.
Just one. Okay, so here's the thing.
Because everybody's prideful.
Yeah. And I'm probably going to jump ahead so we can come back to it if anything. That list is textbook definition of narcissism.
You know what? Oh, go
So
ahead.
if we say, if you just check off one of it, then okay, you can say you're prideful. I can agree with that. But once you put that list out there, you're dealing with a narcissist. And I know this because I've had to deal with that, and I've had to do the research. And all of those are textbook definitions of classifying marks of narcissists. And it's kind of a revelation to me that maybe when we in the church talk about pride, we're probably talking about narcissism. Versus,
So let me do this. Define narcissism for people that might not know and how you're approaching it.
So basically, everything that you just listed, both of you, is the characteristic of a person who's a narcissist. A narcissist is a person who they struggle with self-esteem, and they hide it through these things that we're calling pride. And it's not just one thing, it's like the entire list. They're not able, they have difficulty asking for help. They're not able to say, I did wrong. They're not able to apologize. And if they do, it really takes a lot out of them to do it. They look as if they cannot do no wrong. Like the work that I'm doing, people can't come behind me and do this because God set me up for this. But a narcissist is a person, they put themselves, and it's a defense mechanism. A narcissist in most cases don't realize they're a narcissist. And I actually found out that narcissism can be treated because it takes you to be aware. If you're aware that you're a narcissist, you can change your behavior. But it's very difficult to get a narcissist to admit it.
Because it's contrary to everything.
It's contrary to everything that they hold dear and value, to themselves. But everything that was listed there, when you compile that together, it's a textbook definition of a person who's a narcissist.
That's heavy.
Now, it's so interesting that you say that because when we were planning this, I had sent you a text, and one of the things that I listed was like a link between pride and narcissism. Because I'm like, I don't know too much about it, but when I think about pride and I'm starting to think about it, I'm like, I know that somewhere along here is narcissism, like it's looming somewhere close by. So I was gonna bring that up, but then my girlfriend was telling me like, like narcissism is like a whole like disorder. So like, be careful how you bring that up because you don't want to seem like you're
sensitive.
Right, exactly, and sensitive towards like people with the actual disorder. I'm like, that makes sense. So all right, let me not like dive into that one. But like since you brought it up, we're gonna have to discuss it. Clearly, it needs to be talked about. So with all sensitization and everything.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I think we should definitely
But
discuss
that is
that too.
true, and it's an important point to make is that narcissism is a mental disorder.
Yeah.
So we can't go around calling everybody a narcissist just
Right, right.
because they have
They have
these
qualities.
qualities.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
But yeah.
Okay.
Wow. So I was thinking, and so I was like, I think everybody could have a quality of one of these in them. But I think a lot of things we have qualities of where if it goes unmanaged or uncontrolled, it could turn into something bad.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
And
for
so
sure.
for me, I was saying that hard time asking for help is me, right? And so with that, how I view it is that not that I think I'm, how do I frame this correctly? So one, I don't like to inconvenience people. So that's one. So I don't, I will rather sacrifice my time and energy and know like, oh, it's me. Like I don't have to ask myself for permission. Like, I'm just me. So I can do whatever I can do. The other part of that though, that could end up being too prideful if it's not managed is that I feel like sometimes it's just better that I did it myself. Because when you give that task to someone else, the reality is sometimes they don't do it. And saying the right way is a little bit risky because who's to say my way's the right way? So I have to also, as a human being, be able to see the other person's like viewpoint or approach to that thing, especially if there's some ability to have some variability, basically. So that's a hard balance to strike. And so in my career, especially as being a leader, I'm trying to get myself to a place of, well, one, I shouldn't have to do everything myself, right? And so then with that, the answer is not necessarily not caring how something happens, especially if I feel like there should be a certain level, but it's maybe showing someone how to, like taking the time, or having that conversation of like, hey, let's brainstorm on this. And so for a person like me, I could easily be like, oh, this takes too much time, too much effort. If I just did it myself, it'd be done. But then at the end of the day, what I have to think about is, may not always be the leader for this, right? And so part of that is making sure that you're setting up whatever you're leaving behind for success or the people, like whatever it is. And so that's where it really takes discipline to not have something that could be used and turned into pride and like keep it actually contained. So I know that's something for me that I actually have to consistently and actively work on.
So I will say I do have the same issue when it comes to asking for help. And sometimes I would say it's not always pride or being prideful. Sometimes it's a trauma response. So sometimes the reason we do certain things is not because we're being prideful, but because it's just how
We've been burned.
we've been brought up, or based on the experiences that burnt us.
Right.
We have this trauma response where we automatically react in a certain way. But based on what you said, I think the opposite word for pride would be humility. And when it comes to a good point, like, okay, it is definitely easier sometimes to do things yourself than to train someone. But if you go that extra mile to train someone, that's actually a show of humility, because it takes away from your time, it takes away from other things you can be doing. And working with people sometimes can be difficult. Sometimes. Training people can be difficult, especially if they don't get it right away, or if they're it takes them a little bit longer.
Right.
Or sometimes people just refuse to want to do things a new way. So it takes humility for someone to say, okay, they're not going to do it the way that I would do it, but let me teach them how to do it. Because it's not just about you. It's about the other person growing, and it's about the company or the organization growing as well as a result of you taking the time and putting forth the effort to raise someone up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that.
Piggybacking on Gavin, I think also like a practice of empathy as well, because you're taking yourself out of your shoes and saying, okay, let me help this individual. They may not do it or are doing it in the way that I want it to be done, but still, at least, you know, I'm helping to better them as well as an individual.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you have something on the dangers of pride. You wanna
Yeah.
talk about
Okay.
that?
So the dangers of pride, for sure, in the spiritual sense, we know like one of the big thing with pride is that it gets you too focused on self, right? And it takes God out of the picture. On this one person said that the danger of pride is that it pushes God to the margins of one's spiritual, moral, and temporal existence and puts the prideful person at the moral center. And if God exists at all to the prideful person, it's only to gratify one's ego and sense of importance. Pride causes a person to negate God and take all credit for one's accomplishments. And that definitely lines up with like what we're taught with when it comes to pride in Christianity. You know, it's putting self at the center and then God to the side. Now, there's also, actually still going along with the spiritual sense, pride was a big part of the original sin. You know, the whole, the serpent and Eve, like really what he was tempting her with was pride. Like, oh, if you eat this apple, you're going to become like God. Like, and she was like, oh, that sounds nice. You know, like you shall be like the Most High. Like, that sounds really cool. And the devil himself, like how he was an angel and it was his pride that, you know, started this whole thing. You know, he wanted to be really like Jesus. Like he thought he should be in the top 3. It was him exalting himself, that pride that caused his own downfall. But even in our day-to-day lives, one of the biggest dangers of pride is that it hurts your interpersonal relationships, you know, the relationships with your friends and even with your loved ones, because pride, you rarely see a prideful person in a vulnerable position. And in relationships, a big part of it, especially when you want to have a deep relationship, is vulnerability. And if you're unable to be vulnerable, then obviously your relationships are going to suffer. So that's one of the biggest dangers of it, is that it takes that away from you.
The vulnerability piece is huge because it takes a lot to be able to step outside of yourself, your feelings, and to let someone know that I need help.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like that's something that it's easier for some than others. Like some people have no problem asking for help. And like for me it's just like, I don't want to ask for help. You know? And it's just like that's where I think at the beginning where I was saying, you know, maybe what could be prideful for me, that very same thing might not be prideful for you because of how it's handled and how, like you said, even trauma responses or experiences. And so I think this is one of those things where because it's not black and white, it becomes hard. It becomes really difficult. So I think what we can do to make it a little bit easier and come down certain lanes is like, let's talk about some examples. Like think about how you've seen pride in your life. And you could talk about one from yourself or something you've experienced from someone else, but I can list a few of what it sounds like or looks like. So look what I've done. Look at everything I've done. You better be happy I did this for you. Now this one, Peter Griffin has a segment, and some of you will know who Peter Griffin is from Family Guy, but I was like, let me just...
Am I here for another one?
Can't be talking about Family Guy.
There was a segment on one of the episodes that's just like, you know what really grinds my gears?
Oh, yeah,
this is one. Like, you better be happy I did this for you. And when I hear statements like that, I think I do a pretty decent job of don't go with your first thought or response. Like, why would someone say this? Like, and is it because this is where I'm putting on, I guess, the other person's shoe? I don't think I need a lot of thanks, honestly. The only time I truly need it is when someone makes a statement that makes me think like they don't recognize what I've done for them, right? And so I don't know if that still falls along the lines of, you know, pride or whatever it is, but it's kind of like, in my opinion, it's just like, you're making a statement like this and you really don't notice that I'm right here in front of you and I'm doing the very same things that you're complaining about. And that's where it's kind of just like, maybe it's low-key offensive or just like, well, sometimes you have to, well, in my opinion, I'm like, no, sometimes you have to tell people like, you're mistaken. Like what you're complaining about or saying you don't get, like it's right here in front of you and you're not recognizing it. And so when I hear something like, you better be happy I did this for you, the other side of me trying to get beyond what my instantaneous thought is just like, all right, maybe they're feeling what I feel, but that's just voicing it. Maybe they're saying like, you know, maybe I'm not recognizing truly what they've done. And so instead of just painting it as, oh, you're being too prideful, it's possible that maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm the person that's not saying thank you.
That's mature of you.
You know, but that's not but true and ultimate maturity would be the first, maybe the first thought. It's not there yet, but it's the balancing act I do try to have, so I don't get myself in situations that I regret. So
I guess here's where grace comes in, is that some people need to hear thank yous more than others.
Yeah.
Because when you think about the love languages, we respond in different ways. So one person may not need to hear thank you, but another person does. The way that we receive appreciation, the way we feel acknowledged, a lot of times it depends on our love language. You can say you can be a person that says thank you to everyone. Not everybody appreciates your thank yous.
Right.
But for some people, it makes a world of difference because that's one of the easiest way to give a word of affirmation is by simply saying thank you. So.
But is it inappropriate to tell someone or to ask someone like, why do you need the thanks? Like, so I understand understanding the love languages, but is it? Oh, okay, it is. So it's just like, okay. It's not my place, I guess, to determine or ask or wonder, like, why do you need this? Just because I don't need it, I guess?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
And a lot of times it's hard for us, if that's not my love language, it's harder for me to do it because I don't need it. We love people, we tend to love people the way that we receive love.
Right. Treat people the way you want to be treated.
Right. So that's why I say it does take grace, is because we have to actively think about it. Like, okay, maybe this person needs it. And when we work with people, I think it's important for us to understand their love language. And that's one of the best ways of creating community is by understanding, how do you receive appreciation? How do you know that you're valued? How do you know that you matter? And when you figure out the people around you and what works for them, being able to approach them from their love language rather than our own, it helps to build community.
Yeah. That's good. I told you so. That's on there. Having to have the last word.
That's the one I was going to mention.
Huge.
Or like the one-uppers. You know? You're just having a normal conversation. They find a need to like plug something like, oh, that was even crazier. Okay, that was left field. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Quick to criticize and critique. Yeah. A negative and tears people down, mean-spirited, hate being told to do anything, and King James is all you think you should be reading.
Interesting.
We just had to throw that one in for pettiness, I guess. But one I thought of from a Christian standpoint. Remember, keep thinking about yours. I remember back when we would have AY days and people would stand up to make a statement about why they believe something. The ones that always got me were like, well, I'm a 4th generation Adventist and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And so it would instantly like bring a smile to my face because I'm just like, why do we need to know that? It's just like, and so same thing at work. So it's not just Christianity, but it's sometimes like, I've been with this company for 20 years, or I've been doing this for whatever, and then they say whatever they have to say. And so there's, again, me trying to not go with just what I initially think of just like, what's the point? Like, are you trying to say that you earned the
Right to be wrong.
the right to be like, we better respect what you're saying just based off of longevity? Because I feel like a new believer or a new hire could have just as much to offer, if not more, just from a new experience, right? But the side of me that's trying to be a little bit more mature also can admit that everybody that says a statement like that, their intention isn't to elevate themselves. Sometimes it is just a qualifying thing of just like, you know what? So just like our grandparents or our parents, they're like, you know, this is not my first rodeo, right? I've been around the block. Like, I've had experiences. And so I think that even in those situations where there might be a prideful like statement, a person's character can speak for them. And that's in a lot of situations, not just pride. Like, if you saw something that I did or said that was kind of like uncharacteristic of me, I would hope that you would be like, oh, that's not like Shane, you know, like that's just not him, you know, either let me talk to him, let me clarify, you know, whatever it is. And that's where I'm saying, like, depending on who it's coming from can make a world of a difference. Because if this is just the next in the line of like a bunch of prideful things this person does, then it's just like, oh, well, this is no surprise. But then for someone else, it might be like, oh, you know what? Maybe or maybe not. Like, maybe you should have or shouldn't have said that. But because of the type of person I've observed you to be, like, I know it's not really from a place of pride. And so I think that's the observation, I guess, with this we have to have sometimes, in my opinion. But do you guys think differently? Because I saw facial expressions.
No, I agree. As you said that, I was just thinking about like an experience from when I was in college in NAPS. You know, with NAPS, we used to go different places and do like fundraising in the streets. And sometimes it's like, oh, you have time, get in the van, you know, file an orderly way. Other times it's like, we got to go before we all get arrested. Get in the van. And what they told us we're supposed to do is, if we're in a hurry like that, just, you know, get to the back and sit down, because it's the easiest way to fill the van and get going. And I just remember this one trip that we were on, is like, nobody wanted to go to the back. They didn't care if we had time. They didn't care if we're in a hurry. Who wants to sit in the back? That's the worst place to be. So I always found myself like, I'm in the back again. I'm in the back again. And one day, I thought I was thinking it in my mind, but I ended up yelling it out. Must I always be the humble one? Everybody just started cracking up. And I'm like, I guess the reason I remembered that because it was like, man, how could you say that? That's like a really prideful thing to say. But everybody just shrugged it off, and they're like, well, first of all, he's right. He always ends up in the back. But also because they knew who I was and how I was on a daily basis. So they looked at it differently.
And tapping into even the how, I think how the information is presented is also something. Because like if you're saying it, like you said, trying to one-up in a conversation, you could normally tell the difference, you know? So how it's being presented is definitely, you know, an aspect to take into consideration as to, you know, whether somebody is intentionally being prideful.
Right. Did you guys have one that you wanted to add to the list that I just missed?
Let's see.
And you kind of gave an example.
Okay, we're talking about examples? So...
You don't have anything, no pressure.
I guess a more, kind of a recent example that I have for me was when I was working as a vice principal. It was a lot of work. And I don't know how, but I managed to get it done. And constantly, you know, people would come by and be like, man, I don't know how you did it. We had for an Adventist school, it was considered a large school. And it was 3 different departments. You had elementary, middle school, and high school. You know, most Adventist schools just go up to 8th grade. Many of them have, you know, classes that they're so small that you have 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th together.
That was
so my school was considered, you know, very big, and it was a lot of responsibilities. But somehow I managed to get a lot of things done. And people will constantly be like, man, I don't know how you did it, but you're doing it. Good job, good job. And there would be people that would come and like, I don't know, I don't think anyone else can do what you're doing. And when it came time when I know I was leaving, there was that part of me was like, they can't do it. They can't do it without me. I don't know what's going to happen. Now, I wasn't thinking the school was going to crash and burn because it's been there for over 100 years.
Right.
But I'm like, they're going to go through some type of struggle when I leave, you know. So I had that kind of a prideful thought about it. Of course, when I left, it was like people missed me, but nobody really flinched. Things just kept rolling and going, and it is, you know. So that's kind of like an example. Sometimes we overvalue our worth. And what's interesting is sometimes that keeps us in situations we have no business being in. It's because we're overvaluing our worth and our contribution. But yeah, when we do that, overvaluing our worth, our contributions, that's definitely a sign of pride.
And they always say, like, you know, when it comes to jobs and stuff like that, if you die, they're going to replace you.
Definitely.
Like, you know, they're going to find someone, you know, so definitely don't overvalue yourself.
Balance is key.
Yeah. So some root causes of pride. So there's a licensed professional counselor named Leah McMahon. Wow, I don't know what that first word I said was, but low self-esteem and self-worth can be a root cause of pride. People who feel bad about their flaws and insecurities may mask them with feelings of pride. And so I think that's a deep self-reflection question of, you know, even if you don't think you're prideful or, you know, whatever it is, really think through, do you have anything that you really feel bad or insecure about, and how do you cope with it? Because then that question may get you to a place where, even if it's not pride, at least giving you some answers of like, okay, where am I at and where do I need to go? But for other people, it might actually be you do have symptoms of pride. And so I guess this can go along with this question. Is pride just misunderstood?
Like I said in the beginning,
Yeah.
it's got a bad connotation.
You don't think so? You said yeah.
I did. From the beginning, I said I think we misunderstand pride.
Yeah, and you kind of explained that. So why don't
So pulling back that same example, the need to say, oh, okay, the example you used was feeling the need to like one up on somebody.
Right.
I think breaking that down, so two parts to my answer. Breaking down like the why, like what is that feeling that you feel that I have to tell this person that I did better than them, or, you know, like break that down for yourself, you know, as an individual first, and figure that part of it, and why you feel the way that you feel about it. Second part, run the question for me again, sorry.
Is pride just misunderstood?
Misunderstood. So I feel like in understanding even that, the answer to the question that you would ask yourself, there shouldn't be a misunderstanding, because either you're overcompensating for something. My definition that I gave earlier on pride having being overly having an excessive amount of self-esteem. The excessive part is really the key. And if you're, you know, a person that believes in balance, you shouldn't really be doing anything excessively. So I think that's why it's not really misunderstood.
Good one. Mental and emotional health mean feeling good about ourselves, but sadly, such self-affirmations often are mistaken for pride, which are in stark contrast to the sense of dignity that is synonymous with healthy self-worth. And so that's a difficult balance of how do you have self-worth without going to the extreme of maybe overvaluing yourself or having such is high self-esteem a negative? I don't know, maybe not. But that's a good thing. So I guess
Healthy
whatever
amount.
the
Healthy amount.
Right, a healthy amount. So it's like, how do you go from, or how do you just kind of ensure that you have this healthy self-worth that would avoid the need for pride? That's a really hard question, honestly.
It is.
It's a heavy question.
Yeah. And I think your list can kind of help us while you guys think. So you were talking about when it comes to like the root causes, you were listing like things like, okay, low self-esteem.
All right. So like low self-esteem was definitely the big one that comes to mind. We talked about before fear of vulnerability. There's also a need for self-satisfaction. There's a lack of self-accountability. So pride can be a way of like avoiding taking responsibility for something. Like because you don't want to, can't be me, like I can't, like we said, you can't be wrong. And then there's two that are interesting. Excessive childhood praise could be a root cause of pride. So it says too much praise from in childhood can contribute to unhelpful pride. And it made me think of a video I saw on Instagram where this guy was, this dad was talking about how he doesn't, what's the word he used? Basically, he doesn't like praise his children when they come to him with things. He's like, children have a natural like, oh, daddy, look, I drew this, you know? And normally parents, oh, that's so beautiful. You know, that's what we do. And he was saying like, he's like, we need to stop doing that because what it does is it formulates in the child's brain that like, oh, I need to do things and look for approval from someone else. So like at first, yeah, it's great because they're coming to us for approval. But what happens when they get older and now they're not coming to us for approval, but they're going to their friends for approval or to their boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, like they need approval from others instead of looking inward. So I can't remember how he completely said like what we should do, but I do know the first thing he said that he changed is when his daughter would present it with something like, oh, look, I drew this or I did this or whatever, he would ask, oh, how do you feel about that? You know, because she's looking for approval from him, but he was like, oh, I turn it back on her. So she reflects inward on how she feels about her work. And if she's like, oh, you know, it's good, but I just feel like the colors could have been better, something like that, then he'll respond to that part instead of just praising her in general for something that she's done. He'll praise her or, you know, go along with her criticism about, you know, what she's thinking. So it affirms her being self-critical herself instead of looking for it outwardly.
And giving her own self-worth.
Exactly, yeah.
Some people can say that that's a delicate balance too, right?
It is, I believe it.
Because I think some people get their self-worth through, you know, definitely what happens in childhood and like how people have been able to affirm them. I think the danger for sure is when if you'll do anything for the affirmation.
Right.
And so you'll be with the wrong person because they can say the right things to you. And then everything else is wrong, but because that's what you kind of feed off of, you're just depending on it. So that definitely is a good one.
Well, there's something along the lines of, and I'm not going to get it exactly, but it's along the lines of we spend 12 years in childhood and then the rest of our lives healing from childhood.
Oh.
So, yeah, what happens in our childhood, it does have a huge impact on how we respond to things for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
So it is definitely, for a parent, it's a delicate balance on how they react to their child. But I think the key thing there with what that person was saying is active parenting rather than being passive. Be purposeful in everything that you do with your child.
Yeah. It's a big responsibility.
Definitely.
Yeah.
For sure.
So much you have to like think about that. Like, oh, that wouldn't even come to my mind, you know? That just seems like the normal thing to do. Your child comes to you, oh yeah, great job, Timmy, you know?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, you gotta think about that now. Hold on.
I'm
Turn
curious.
into so many different ways too.
Right.
Like just that action,
Right.
because that could spin off like, oh, you know, maybe that child now has problems. Like my parents never gave me approval, you know.
Now they have low self-esteem because nothing was good enough for them. It was always, what do I think?
That's so true.
Which, again, if the child is one that requires positive affirmation, that might backfire for that child.
That's true. That's true.
So learning the child is key,
Oof. It's a lot. It's nuanced.
and each child is different. So
But I guess that, which this is a different topic, but it's kind of like, are our love languages or our needs birthed from our childhood, or are we just born with it? So it's kind of like, so the person that needs that affirmation, does it come from a place of, well, you know what, my parents were always like telling me like, good job, like I'm so proud of you, and that transitioned into like, you know, post the 12 years or whatever, into being like, that's what I need? Or is it really something that you're birthed with and that there's certain people that from your childhood feed into it?
It's an interesting question.
Very interesting
Nature
question.
versus nurture.
Yeah, nature versus nurture. You had one more on the
So
list
the
of what you
last
forgot.
root cause of pride that this list has is evolutionary guidance. So it says pride may be a neurocognitive system that helps people take advantage of opportunities to gain respect and value from others. So evolutionary psychologists believe that authentic pride can be adaptive, encouraging people to keep trying and succeed and to achieve higher social status and group acceptance. So basically, like, it was a means to get to the next level. If you didn't have pride, well, you weren't pushing to get to the next level, so you were left behind. And those that did have pride were pushing forward, so they moved forward. It's like,
I'm
okay.
actually glad to hear that one because I've been thinking about it, just waiting for an avenue for this. Was that there is a social aspect to pride, and that is what that's explaining. Because when you think we are social creatures,
Right.
You know, the term that they use was evolutionary, but as Christians, we also believe that we are social creatures. We need, in order for us to survive and to be healthy and flourish, we have to be able to fit into our society, and like take the idea of keeping up with the Joneses. Bad for your finances, but it's good for your social status. But yeah, in aspects of us being social creatures, there's that aspect of pride that it helps. What we're trying to do is to fit in to our society, to those around us. When you're at work, the things that you do, it helps you to fit in with those you work with. When you're at church, the things you do, it helps you to fit in with the people that you go to church with. When you're at school, wherever it is that you are, you do things that help you to fit in your surrounding. Like even where you live, you know, you keep up with the Joneses. Why? Because my neighbor, they're living like that. I have to be able to keep that status before the HOA kicks me out. You know. So
Yeah, it's a good one. So, in talking about the root causes of pride, I think the opposite of some of these things can help us with determining what good pride looks like, or you know, what are the things that can maybe prevent the wrong form of pride from happening. So, how can we help when it comes to high self-esteem, either or getting, you know, higher self-esteem or higher self-satisfaction or being vulnerable? Like, how do we help that for ourselves and maybe for other people that maybe we can identify as them being maybe too prideful or something like that? What are some things that we can do?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is exemplify it. Doesn't always work. Depends how developed this prideful person is. But a lot of times, like, I'll humble myself, or like I'll be vulnerable myself to a prideful person, and hopefully they will respond, you know, either in kind or, like, at minimum, maybe they'll just, like, whatever action they're doing that is, like, prideful at the moment, maybe they'll, like, bring that down because they see, like, oh, you know, like, he is, like, express vulnerability. So hopefully the social norm part of their brain will, like, you know, like, okay, you know, because it would be, there's things that they do that prideful people do that I think they don't realize at the moment. But when there's that stark of a contrast, I think it does spark something in them that they're like, oh, like, it would be really weird for me to exalt myself right now after he just said this debasing thing. Like, that might be a little too far. That's the first thing that comes to mind to me.
I like that. Well, we know Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. Which was a very interesting statement, because I think at that time and continuing, we're in a society where it's just like, you go low, I'm going lower. And so
Yeah.
I think with that, that's an aspect of negative pride probably, because I mean, maybe there's some times where it is appropriate to defend yourself for what you believe and stuff like that. But sometimes it really isn't that deep. Like, you have to think of the motivation behind your defense. Is it to make a point? Is it to insult someone, to make an example out of them? Or is it like a learning experience? And so sometimes it is appropriate to do what you you did, even with like the naps and the bus. Like, you know, I've been in those situations where I have to ask myself, like, is it that deep? Like, is it like, what is it worth? And so, you know, I could be that person where it's just like, okay, I don't mind going to the back, I guess, or going on first or whatever. You know, it is what it is. I think when you did speak up, it made maybe everybody think about a reality. So sometimes it's just like, it is appropriate to bring it up. But motivation or your motive is super important. And I think that's where you really have to think through. Sometimes I just need to take the humble route, or I can take whatever could be described as an L or whatever it is temporarily, because either this doesn't need to become bigger than it is. And sometimes those same people, because of how you react or take something, come around and be like, you know, what is it that you have that I don't have? Like, how are you able to handle things this way? How come these things don't stress you like it stresses me? I think that's where some of those conversations that I've even had have come from, and just how I'm able to handle certain things differently. And I think that's kind of something you have to practice. It's really just practice. Anything else? Oh?
I guess from what you're saying, that's where a healthy level of pride becomes important.
Yeah.
Is with that, not allowing people to walk all over you. Or we can call it self-esteem. Having a healthy self-esteem. So that there are times definitely where you have to, well, always, you have to create boundaries with people. And you have to uphold those boundaries. And if people are going across that boundaries, it's important for you to be very firm. Like, no, you're not doing that. And I was going to say, what was I going to say? It left me.
I'll add it on and maybe I'll come back to you. Communication is key, and haven't always been good at communication. So I'll piggyback on what you're saying. You can do some of the same things just differently, honestly. And so there was this book at work called Crucial Conversations, and when I became a leader, like, I think the thing I give the most credit to in the sense of how I evolved as a leader was that book, because it helped me understand the other person's role and my role. And so they were talking about the reason why, if you have like a difficult team member or whatever that you can't get through or whatever it is, you have to bring them to this pool of shared meaning, right? And so it's just like, if one person's on one end of the pool and you're on the other, and you're thinking that they're just gonna come over to your side, that's not gonna happen. But what you have to do is make it safe for a person and like get in the pool together, make sure there's like an understanding, communicate effectively, and then the likelihood of, they also say you have to ask yourself the question, like, what is it that you actually really want? You know, don't think about just the symptom of whatever the issue is. Think about the end result. What would be your goal? And that's going to help you while you're in this pool together to get there. And I think with that, your goal in like when you're having some of these conversations of like standing firm is not about, again, like proving a point to them of like, you're not gonna mess with me, but it's more so sometimes of just like also a helping piece. And sometimes people don't want to be helped. Sometimes it's just going to be a seed, but then, you know, and sometimes it's just going to be like, I'm going to let you know the respect I require or whatever, but it's really the way that you communicate that is super important. And I think sometimes we just lack the vulnerability of being able to, but then also being willing to be patient in, hey, before I talk about this, maybe I need to take a second or a minute or a day to like construct like how I need to approach this. And that's sometimes how strongholds are broken. It's just like a simple actual conversation, and in a sense that's like caring. So
jumping into even conversation, I feel like a good question of what you said, the question was like, how do we address prideful people? Or
and how do we help, or like, you know, either in us
help.
or other people,
So a good question, I think, is just why. Like, it depends on the environment, first off, for sure. But, you know, if it's in a safe space, hey, why did you feel the need to say that? You know, or, you know, what brought that thought on? You know what I mean? And hopefully maybe we don't have to have a whole intervention, but at least the person would then question us, like, what is it that triggered me to give that response?
I'm not gonna lie.
Uh-oh.
You asked that question, I just feel like the immediate response of somebody is defensive. Immediate.
Well, then at that point, they're not ready to receive the help that they need. So,
but I don't know if that's true though. Like,
you can make it safe. That's the point of what I was saying, right? So
you can.
Go ahead.
I don't. Okay, with some people you can do that. I think there's certain people that this is so funny. You can't be like that direct. Like,
that's why I said the environment, though. Safe space, keyword.
Nah, even the space. There's people that like you come direct. They're like, whoa, like they feel like they're being attacked, like, or they feel maybe embarrassed, so like they won't give you an actual good response because it's embarrassing, So like I think you have to try to find a way to get the answer to why without asking why directly.
And you think that's almost 100% across the board?
90%. It's unfortunate, but I really feel like that's true. Like for a lot of people, because I notice it too. Like with myself, when someone says it, like my brain goes defensive, and then like I'll like, oh, hold on, like
why are you getting
defensive? Need to,
defensive?
because that's natural. I feel like that's natural human response. Like so. Someone asks you. Okay, so maybe, oh gosh, maybe it goes to childhood. Like when someone asks you, why did you do that? I immediately feel like a 5-year-old, and my parents are like, why did you do that? That's just the immediate response I go to. And I think maybe, who knows, maybe that's where other people go to. Like when someone asks you that, you go to this response of like, like.
And there's also that social aspect of it too. Is like, wait, am I being rejected?
Right.
I can't be
I did something wrong. Oh my God.
It's accusing. It's a statement that accuses. So this is where the book says, instead of saying something like that, it's like, go get your copy. But I get nothing from this. But it was saying something about describing how that makes you feel.
Yes, key.
So that's the difference.
Exemplify, present the vulnerability so that they will hopefully be vulnerable in return. Yeah.
Because sometimes people have a problem with saying like, oh, when you did this, it made me feel this. Because it puts you in a place of maybe feeling weaker or whatever it is. But I've actually practiced it and it actually works.
Yeah.
And so in general, 90% of people probably just don't feel okay with anything that comes across as you're accusing me or you're coming for me. And so how you phrase it or go about it can actually make the difference of like, you know what, when you said this, like I understood it this way. Is that correct?
Yeah, see, that's better.
Like,
that's
and
better.
that's where
you're
if
asking
someone
why,
pops
but
off for that, like we don't need to have any other conversation ever again. That's my feeling. But I think about it. I read that book at maybe 28 years of age. Like some people may have never read the book and they're in their 50s and 60s. And so think about how many times or how many things we go through in life just because we don't know how. And so a lot of times, right? And I don't think it's like bad intentions, but sometimes we just really don't know how. And that's why I even asked the question of like, what can we do to even help, even if it's ourselves or other people? Because people watching this may have that, they feel like they have some parts of pride within themselves that they want to address, or someone that they know, and hopefully like what we present, they're actually going to be able to use to address it, and it can lead to healthier relationships.
So what I remember what I was going to say earlier was in regards to the same question: how can we help others? A few weeks ago I was watching The Daily Show, and the host was interviewing someone about a book that they wrote, and the author was saying, he was talking in his book was about the increase in suicide among children and young adults. And he was saying, with everything that's going on in our society over the last few years, that has definitely, and with the introduction of social media, all of that has significantly caused a spike in suicide rates among young people. And he was saying, but one of the interesting things that he found and he included in his book, he says, I'm an evolutionist. I don't believe in God. I don't believe he exists. But I did notate in my book that those young people who grew up in religion, in a Christian atmosphere, the rate of suicide among those people are significantly less than those who did not grow up in a church atmosphere. And I think it's an important thing to note, because he's an evolutionist and he's saying that there is great value in someone being in a church community. So the answer to the question, how do we help other people, is by building that as a church, building that community, building that safe space. And by building safe spaces for people, we're able to help them to do better, be better.
Right. Yeah, I like that. We have to be able to lift people up. Like, some people have a problem with like giving people like, hey, good job, Gavin. Like, some people just can't do it. And I don't know necessarily why. And maybe it's just, like you said, maybe because they don't need it, that they don't know how to give it. Sometimes they feel like they're not going to get someone big-headed, I guess. And with that, I don't know if that's more harm than good, in that prevention. But, sometimes if you can make someone's day by just telling them, like, good job, or recognizing them, like, do it.
Do it.
And that's the same thing for, at church, work, even in your home. Like, I think home is the start for a lot of things. And I think a lot of sadly, some of these negative traits can start there because, like you said, childhood, or even when you leave childhood and you build your own family, like, it's some of these very things that sneak into, the house. And so you have to be able to be vulnerable, talk about it, and hopefully, and the hope is that the person you're talking to about it can receive, because that's a whole other battle.
Yeah.
But it takes two mature people.
You can only worry about your half,
That's true.
You can't control the other person's half.
Yeah. And I think it could tell you a lot about another person, for sure. So the Bible on pride. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. And I got it in the Message version as well. It says, God is not out to, oh no, actually this is not it yet. God is not out to hurt your pride, he's out to kill your pride. So it's like, oh, yikes, that's crazy. So then the Message version says, first pride, then the crash. The bigger the ego, the harder the fall. And so the ego type of pride is the thing that gotta go.
Yeah.
It's just like, you've really got to humble yourself, or you will get humbled. And so that's what that one's saying. But Proverbs 11:2 says, when pride comes, then comes shame. The Message version of that says, the stuck up fall flat on their faces, but down to earth people stand firm. So I think with that, I think of don't forget where you came from. And in so many different areas, like, from the career to what you have house-wise, money-wise, even down to the dirt you came from.
Right.
Like, it's just like, you were
Spiritual-wise.
created from dirt, and you can definitely return to it, spiritual-wise as well. Like, don't arrive and forget everything that you've done, right?
Right.
And so I think that's a huge warning of the down-to-earth people stand firm. It's just like the understanding that our righteousness is as filthy rags. Like, as much as you do for God, like, that's good, you've improved, you've done better. But, like, really don't ever forget, like, with a snap of the finger,
Can get taken away.
it can be taken away. Or you can just fall back. Like, it's just like, it's grace and mercy. It's like all those things working together on your behalf to have you where you are. So I think that's a good reminder.
I would say, in some respects, for some people, they would actually have to forget where they came from.
Ooh.
Because yes, maybe you've done it that way for so long and it worked for you.
That's true.
But what about now? Maybe your experiences over the years has produced success, but what is needed now? Things like that. Sometimes some people do have to, like, be able to step aside and allow others to take the reign.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Good point.
Proverbs 15:33 says, "The fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility." And in the Message version, it says, "Fear of God is a school in skilled living. First you learn humility, then you experience glory." And so it's like the humble part comes first, and then you'll be elevated. But if you focus on the latter before the humility part, you can't accept it the way it's supposed to be given. So, and then you had one from Matthew, I believe.
Yeah, so Jesus basically reiterating the things that were in the Old Testament. He says, all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. So pretty much like that last verse that you said, like if you do the exalting, it's kind of like God's like, well, all right, you're good. You don't need my help. You did it all by yourself. But if you humble yourself, then I think God sees that and he rewards that, and he's going to be the one to exalt you. And that's definitely the better way to do it, to receive God's exaltation than your own.
Right.
I think of Psalms 23 where it talks about the Lord prepares a table for you in front of in the presence of your enemy.
Right.
It's just like, don't take the place of God. Like, you're going to think about your own revenge, and it's just like, not that you're praying for the worst for them, but it's just like, God can handle it. So you got to handle what you're responsible for, and he's got the rest. But the Message version, of course, I had to look it up and see what it says. It says, "Do you want to stand out? Then step down. Be a servant. If you puff yourself up, you'll get the wind knocked out of you. But if you're content to simply be yourself, your life will count for plenty." And that's actually, quite crazy to, think about, but it's true. It's just like, just worry about what you're supposed to be doing, not really. And I guess that's where the envy could sneak in, because it's just like when you're starting to consider everybody else, what they think, what you're, trying to get to their status, all that type of stuff. Or it's just like, no, you got enough to worry about for today. Like, we're going to worry about your lane, serving, being humble, stuff like that, and everything else will come.
And I think if you look, because you could just, say the phrases, say the verses, and think, okay, some might say like, okay, well, this is just, something you read. But if you even look at like the examples in the Bible, like it backs up what it's saying, like if you look in the Bible, it's a lot of the people that were humble that God exalted. And a lot of people that were exalted, God was like, all right, you gotta come down. Like, for example, you have...
He chose fishermen?
Right. His disciples were fishermen with no education.
Yeah.
The King David, right? The youngest boy out in the field. Samuel was like, nah, it's got to be one of these other brothers. No, God's like, no, it's that little boy over there.
Mary Magdalene?
Mary Magdalene, So there's so many examples of it's the little guy that God looks at. And then you have the people that exalt themselves. So the first one that comes to mind is like Nebuchadnezzar, who's like, oh, I'm like the king of all kings. Like, he makes his gold statue, like my kingdom's going to reign forever. And God's like, yeah, your kingdom's about to end like next week. So I'm like, you're done, So you see both examples in the Bible. It lines up,
And I don't think that's to say don't be ambitious.
No, not at all.
It's saying to definitely have that balance.
Right.
In all things, have balance.
The right motive. So how do you overcome pride? Daily examination and surrender. So like starting off by surrendering yourself to God, and really making sure that you're in alignment, because if you do that, you're already halfway there, I would say. Just the surrender part is sacrifice. Accountability and feedback. That's a huge vulnerability step of asking people and saying like, either I'm struggling with this, can you help me, keep me accountable, or asking for feedback. Like, do you feel like I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and being open to it. Not to say that you're going to automatically take it as the gospel truth, but you have to be willing to be open to hearing something that might be different than what you believe.
Takes a little bit of a mindset shift, especially if pride is something that you struggle with. So you have to kind of see that see that criticism as a way to improve. Like if you look at it as someone not attacking you, but like, okay, how can I get better? Then you'll probably be a little bit more receptive to it.
Right. Genuine repentance. So you might have been prideful and you've had prideful moments, but it's not too late. Like it's possible. I think one of you were talking about, even when it comes to narcissism, like there's things that are treatable. Even though it's become your norm, it doesn't have to be your future.
Right.
And so you might not lose all of it tomorrow, but if you take a step today, like those steps build on each other. And I think sometimes it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And it's something that you can look back on and be like, it was worth it. Like I see a difference, I see a change. Prayer for transformation, that's huge. Like some things we have not because we ask not. And it's like you have to actually take these things to the Lord in prayer, being honest with God. It's great to have like the bedtime and mealtime prayers, but it's just like sometimes you need to take a little bit extra time and like, God, like I'm struggling with this, and asking God to actually transform. There's that Psalms verse that's like, search me, O God, know my heart, lead me in the everlasting way. It's really the heart and the mind, and those are really powerful houses in the body, and you really need God and the Holy Spirit to really help you with that. Scripture immersion, like you said, knowing the scriptures, like knowing these verses even that we've said is like a good question mark of where do I fall within this? Do I fall in this? Focused worship is a very interesting one. If you put God at the center instead of the outskirts, like you were saying earlier, then there's no room for that negative pride, because like God's the center. And so making sure that he's the focus of what you do is important. Service and sacrificial love. Service has a way of humbling people.
Yeah.
Like working in the hospital is like the most humbling experience I have all the time. And I think in one of the shows, or maybe I said it somewhere else, where I did this thing called, I think it was like the honor walk maybe. And it was, I believe, from what I saw, someone was intubated. I think they're probably passed away at that point, but they're with their family, they're being walked, and like they're asking all the employees to line the hallways as this honor walk is happening, and the nurses are pushing the stretcher and the family's behind them, and they were like all in tears. And that person is going to be like donating certain, organs as a transplant, patient to people that need it. And so working in that environment and just seeing those things on a constant basis is just like something where it's just like any day something like that could happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And you really just have to stay cognizant of how delicate life can be.
Seriously.
And really, when there's people that are not in the same position as you or the best positions, never looking at them, looking down at them or anything like that. Even, it's common to see homeless people and just be like, oh, I bet if I gave you money, like you're going to go to the drugstore or something. Like, that's a very easy thought to have. But the reality is we don't know all of their hearts and all of their minds. And, maybe it's not our job to even really know what they do with it. Our job is, if we see something and if we're impressed, to help, like we're there to serve. And there's something where Jesus talks about, like, I was hungry,
right? You didn't feed me, right?
I was thirsty, like all these little things where he teaches the little things that we often miss,
right,
or that we're going to miss in life. So embracing humbling experiences is hard, but it's necessary. Sometimes we have to be humbled. Cultivate gratitude and reflect on the cross. Reflecting on the cross is an interesting one because it goes beyond thinking about Easter. But it's just like a daily reminder of like, God did this for everybody, but he did it for me. And it's just like the one thing that brings us all together besides being the human race is that God did this for all of us, and I'm amongst this group. So even if I've changed my life, like I'm still in the group that he did this for. So you have to remember that if there's someone that may not be where you are or that needs help, like you were or maybe are in that group that's needing help as well. So those were some things. I think you had a few more.
A couple that a lot of them overlap, so I'll just say the ones that are a little bit different. Reminding yourself how much someone means to you. So this is helpful in, like how we were saying before, how pride can hurt your interpersonal relationships, especially if someone is maybe addressing you about your pride. Maybe they're asking you like kind of those more direct questions. It can help instead of having that immediate defense response, like remind yourself, okay, this person really does mean something to me. I don't think they're actually attacking me. Let me have a appropriate response, not the first response that comes to mind. Also, finding ways to express your feelings. If you don't feel you're able to express what you're thinking at the time, then you might need to like take a step back. You might need to journal, write a letter, ask to come back to the conversation another time, because maybe at that moment you're already in a like triggered state. Maybe like that pride has got you in that state, and so you need to like take a step back to really address what's going on. And then nope, actually the other ones, they were covered. Yeah.
So when it comes to pride and everything that we talked about today, what would you say is the most important thing that someone should take away from this conversation? Okay, I'll go first. So I would say, I think something that stuck out to me is being willing to ask someone the question about yourself, about if they see you as having prideful tendencies. I think that's a very hard question to ask, but it could be a very revealing question as well. It requires vulnerability, so you might be doing two stones,
Right.
Two birds,
one stone. There, thank you. And you might get but I guess that's not like necessarily like something you want. Like I'm being vulnerable and you're telling me I'm prideful. But I think it's something where conflict sometimes, some of these rough moments can help deepen a quality relationship and can open dynamics. And so asking that you're someone that you trust, like that question of like, is there, when it comes to pride, is there something that I can work on? Is there something I can do to be more humble? I think it's something that I take away from this.
That's good. Yeah. I feel like people will probably be surprised on some of the things that they were blind to, or they didn't realize how it was perceived, because it may not even be their actual intention. Like they may not realize like, oh, like that wasn't even coming from a place of pride, but now I see how it could be.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, that's a good one. I'll say, when it comes to trying to address pride, especially if it's something you struggle with, or if it's someone that's like struggling with narcissism, you've got to be patient with yourself and give yourself grace, because that's not something that's going to change overnight. Like it took years for these things to be ingrained in you. It's not going to next week change all of a sudden. So taking the small victories, and just, every day trying to do better than than the last day. I think that's a big thing.
That's daily walk.
Mine.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to ask to restate the question.
Buying time. What's like a final thought you would give?
Okay, a final takeaway. Go ahead.
What stood out to me the most was when you guys said to reflect on your whys. Why do I do this? Why do I feel this way? Why did I respond this way?
Yeah.
Constantly, reflecting on your whys can I think it helps you to be able to change your behavior. If I know why I'm acting this way or doing certain things, then I can, step aside and do it differently, or be calmer about it.
I love that.
So, the questions that you stated after the person's rejecting the why. Do you remember?
One more time?
You remember when we were talking about the why, and you said somebody may feel attacked,
Oh, right.
and then you said rephrasing the question.
Okay.
Instead of accusing them,
Right.
saying
Well, I don't think it's an accusation.
Okay.
But
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not, but it's
Yeah.
just how it's often received. Yeah.
Yeah. So rephrasing the question so that can, probably
This is how
help
it
them
made me
see
feel.
it differently and feel it differently, really.
Yeah.
I'm
that's a good
sorry
one.
you understood it this way, but let's try this.
Yeah. And another thing you could do, the one you said, this is how what you did made me feel, or this is how I perceived what you did.
That's it.
That's a really great tool, and not even just with pride, in like so many aspects of life, especially with anyone you have. I would say definitely anyone you have a relationship, even people you don't have a relationship with, because it's not human nature to want to hurt someone, and especially if they tell you like you hurt me. It's not human nature to be like, well, good, like usually you get a different response. So that's a really great one. Another one is honestly just giving like disclaimers. So like shutting down the thought before they can have it. Like, I'm not saying this in an attacking way, but like, why did you, that way that kind of stops their brain from like going to, she's attacking me. Like, it's like, oh, okay, she said she wasn't attacking me. Hold on. Okay.
Right.
So let me actually answer this question. That's another good one.
Should write a book.
I'm sure these were all taken from books
Right?
somewhere.
Yeah, probably. Someone said that you have to sometimes think about the best about people. I hope I got that right. But it's basically
Assume the best about
assume
people.
the best about people.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
even though, I guess that goes back to the character type of thing I was talking about, but what you see a person acting like or saying, it's kind of like, there are a ton of sayings that, how you act is how you are and all that type of stuff. But again, sometimes we don't see the full picture. We don't understand experiences and all that type of stuff. So it can be helpful to assume the best in people until it's confirmed otherwise. And that might not be enough confirmation to be like, oh, this is the otherwise, so give people that grace and chance. But we hope you learned something from this topic of pride. I think it's like it's one of those deeper type of topics that doesn't have a necessary black and white answer of pride, good or bad, or whatever it is, but it's just like, it's something to think about as we're on this journey to continue to elevate, to improve our lives and that of our community. So we have a talk to the walk that you have today that's very interesting.
So this talk to the walk says, basically the person is saying, when can we talk about the church's relationship with the community, both in a broad sense and also right outside their doors? So I'm interpreting this question to mean like, what can a church's impact be on their community in a broad and like very local sense? Or maybe either asking, what are we doing wrong in our community? However your interpretation of it is.
Can you read the original question?
The original question, the original statement / question, it says, when can we talk about the church's relationship with the community, both in a broader sense and right outside their doors?
I don't know if I'm talking specific to the original question, but just creating safe spaces in general to have these type of conversations or have help conversations with other individuals who may be struggling with different disorders.
That's true.
Speaking to the needs of the communities. So both outside our doors and in a broader sense, like our church is a community, that's one community, but even like we talked about last week and having a financial seminar here, and when we were advertising it, we're like, finance and church isn't just tithes and offering and money's the real evil. Like, there's plenty of people in our communities that need help or that can use, wise counsel or like, this is what worked for me. And so I think being aware of that as a church is something that we're doing to help the people that are right inside our doors.
Right.
I think sometimes there's extremes of, we go straight outdoors and then we bring them inside and then there's nothing here for them except maybe the spiritual side. So it's balancing that. But then in the general community, what are the needs? We're in a guess, depressed area here. And so it's just like, how can we serve them first, their needs, and then I think they'll be open to the other parts of like the spiritual. But if it's straight tracks, then that might not be the best, as always. But I will say, while there could always be improvement, I think that this is something that our church does pretty decently compared to others, because I know working with a project right now, and every other week they open up the buildings to like serve food to the people that are in need. And I found out just 2 weeks ago that people start lining up at 6 a.m.
Oh yeah, dude,
in their cars. And like the lines stretch down the street. And I remember when the food program first started here, if we got like 20 people, it would be something. But like the fact that it's grown to like over 100 cars, and like there's volunteers that start the day before, like packing boxes, like, and like people transferring it to people's cars, like that's really something where I'm like, oh, like we are like making some sort of impact of like serving people. I don't think it's something that people, the general like church knows though. I think it's only like the people that really participate that really know like how big this program is. But I think that's an example of something that the church can do to show that we care.
I agree. Things like that are really needed, one, and I think they have a big impact in making your presence known in the community. Like you said, not just from like the spiritual aspect, but in like the real life, every day to day, what are your needs type of aspect. The other thing too that you mentioned too is like having topics that relate to people's real life, like yes, salvation is extremely important, and people do need to know about that, but they also need to know about how to deal with the regular day-to-day things
stuff,
like
it's true.
because and then show them how in all these regular day-to-day things they can involve God in it. That's like how you bring the spiritual parts to everything, like show them like how can you involve God with your issue with pride, with your issue with lust, with your issue with sexuality, with your issue with lying, like all those different things. Like it's stuff we all struggle with. It's not like that struggle stops once you become a Christian. So let's talk about it. How do we deal with it? I think that shows one transparency too. People can see that, like it seems
not just me.
Yes, it's like this is doable now, because I think some people really do have a belief that like, oh man, those Christians, I mean, I guess they just have it together, or maybe they're pretending to have whatever, but like I can't get there.
Well, I'll flip the script. I think on top of that, some of them believe that, but some of them are just like, they see through it and they're like, oh, you guys are hypocrites. So like, why would I still have the same struggles as you and try to pretend I don't?
Right,
It's just like, no, I'd just rather do whatever I'm doing, and it's a little bit simpler.
Yeah, I don't have to pretend.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that transparency I think is a big thing, because we're all on a journey. And none of us have made it yet. So showing people that, I think, will be pretty encouraging to know, okay, no, I can do, like I can go on a journey, Yeah.
So I was going to say the exact same thing.
My bad.
Yeah, I was. And I think that, having those I think that separates younger generations of Adventists from older generations. Because I think our older generation members want and believe that during that divine service, it has to be these specific messages. And, I think I'm going on Adventism going on to 30 years of Adventism. And it's like, how much more times do I have to hear this same message? And I think a lot of young people do leave the church for that same reason. It's like, I'm hearing the same thing over and over and over again. So at this point, what is the church doing for me? Nothing. So those practical messages, I think, are essential. It does help build a community within a church, and as well, when people come in from outside in the community to our churches, it does provide them with something that is practical, that is helpful, that they can use. Case in point, I was unemployed for 1.5 years, but coming to church was like, I wish I could tell somebody, hey, can you help me find a job? But No, I couldn't do that. I didn't feel that. You know, so having those resources where you can depend on the church to meet your needs. Definitely, the food program is a big one. And like I came with my brother Keenan one night, and there was a big old truck outside, and I'm like, why is this big truck out here? And he said it was the food program. You know, so that's like one example of great success. Of what the church is doing to the community.
Gotta keep
and
that.
there's so much more. And I think when you think of your mega churches, we don't necessarily as Adventists support the idea of mega churches. But one of the things that they do great is give to their community
They have
what
a lot
they
of
need.
initiatives.
So they give that spiritual message, but they also provide practical things that the community needs. And I think when you mesh it, because that's what Jesus did, really. Jesus didn't only preach,
right?
But he healed, he fed, and he comforted. You know, he gave people what they needed, and sometimes members of the religious sect were like, "Why are you doing that? You're not supposed to do that. It's the Sabbath." You know. But he did it, and that's the example I think we need to follow.
I like that. I like it. Well, this was a good question. Whoever submitted this, you're completely anonymous. So if you have a question that you kind of want to have discussed very much in a safe place and space, go to thewalklive.org. There's our website with our past episodes along with the Talk to the Walk section. And also there's a place for prayer requests. So if you have those, you can submit that anonymously as well. But I want to say thank you to everybody for watching tonight. I want to thank our panel because I didn't introduce you. So Gavin's been here with us earlier in the season, so thank you for coming back. You know, I'll just say thank you really to you because I didn't know you moved and that this drive was triple, maybe quadruple the time it would have usually have been. But Gavin never brought it up. He's not like, well, you know, I moved like this far away. And he's just like, okay, what time? I'll be there. So I really do appreciate that. That was the humbleness of it. Of course, Janelle, I think it's your first time on the show. Welcome. Hopefully it's not the last. She hasn't said anything. All right. And of course, Andre and myself here as usual. We want to thank Lee for being here. He's our tech guy. We appreciate you, man. One day you'll be on the show. Okay. But yeah, thank you guys. We have a couple of announcements and then we're going to be out of here. So as always, share this with the people that you know. Some people like to donate to our ministry, so you can do that through Cash App at $MT Zion SDA, and you can put AY as the note. And then our next events that you should be aware of. So in August, we're having a event that is, I would say, very pivotal and first time we're ever doing something like this. So in our Talk to the Walk segment, we've had several questions about the LGBTQ plus community and the church. And so it's been like a topic that's kind of like hard to kind of know how to present it and how to discuss it. And so we have partnered with a ministry called Coming Out Ministries, and I know the name may make you already question, but you can check out their website, and we have a page on the mtzionsda.org page /sexuality, and that's what the event is called. You can find information about what it's going to be about. This ministry that's coming to present, they're going to be here on the Friday and all day on Saturday to present on the topic. There's going to be testimonials as well of people that have been within the community and want to talk about their experience. This is like a judgment-free type of event and zone, and so we want everybody to feel comfortable. We want to learn together. So we invite you on August 23rd and 24th to come out. And during that time, we're going to warn people ahead of time that we also plan to have STD testing free of charge. And so this is for anybody, not for just the LGBTQ plus community, but this is for any and everybody. Again, this is very much a judgment-free event, but we do care about health in our communities as well. And so this is something that one of our members has partnered. When she heard about the initiative, she offered this as something that we can have as well that's free for the community as well. So this is really different for us, but we could really use your support in this initiative of August 23rd and 24th. And then, of course, with Homecoming coming up October 25th and 26th, Pastor Myron Edmonds is going to be here, and we are excited to have him along with all the other festivities that we're going to be planning for Homecoming. So you do not want to miss this and more events at our church. But with that said, we want to end tonight by having a prayer because it's hot in here. I'm like sweating, guys. I'm just like, it is very hot. So we're going to go ahead and pray this out. Dear Jesus, just thank you so much for what we talked about tonight. Thank you for bringing us together to talk about tough topics like pride. It's something that could be inside each and every one of us, and we know too much of anything good even can turn bad, or it's just hard to balance things in life. But we know that with you, anything is possible. So for us that are struggling with the sides of pride that might not be the most beneficial to our lives, I pray that you help us to be honest with ourselves, confront it, and knowing that you can ultimately help us. I pray that we take these things seriously, we take it in prayer, but then we also practice to just become our best selves each and every day. I pray for everybody's prayer requests. You know what they are. There might be emotional, mental, spiritual, physical needs that people have, but I pray that you give them the comfort and peace that they need at this time. I pray that you keep us safe and together until we come back at the next show. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you all. Appreciate you. Whoa. Before you go, make sure you like us on all social media platforms at The Walk Live, and find us on any of your favorite podcast platforms. Our journey doesn't have to end here. Join us on the next walk.